Immunosuppressant drugs. Sorry, my mind just went blank for a minute. In the past, the most important thing to me would have been having a perfect family. I wanted everything perfect. I strive so hard to have a perfect family. I thought that I had a lot of hurt because I had great love, but now I discovered that what I had was great expectations of someone else to fulfill my needs. And the loss of that person to fulfill my need for love caused me to feel bereft of love, and that I could not survive without it.
We constantly expect things from others. We expect them to respect us, to understand us, to listen to us. We want dad to pay attention to us. We want mom to be comforting towards us. We want siblings to accept us. So other people are the source of the acceptance that I need, and the belonging that I need, and the harmony that I need, and the security that I need, and so on. And we don't have to try to come up with these expectations. We just have them naturally. I go into relationships, I pursue relationships, or I'm in relationships for the purpose of the receiving. What I might receive.
You take from them, you feed from them, and you just give out what you took from them. That comes out, and it will show in your behavior and in your body as well.
People are clearly spiritually dependent because we are always reaching out for our spiritual needs to be supplied from somewhere else. So children are born that way. They're looking out to someone else, to something else, to supply their spiritual needs. But there's this delusion that causes us to think that we can be spiritually independent. I give love from myself, and so I have loved you with my love, and I have respected you with my respect, and I have understood you with my understanding, and I have honored you with my honor, and so on. And so from that standpoint, we see ourselves as spiritually independent.
So what I learned about the cause of my disease was that disease always correlates with loss in a person's life, and that this idea of personal loss causes dysfunction in the body. And as I said, I felt like I had lost something very, very precious to me, that I wanted to have an intact family unit, a harmonious family. I wanted to grow old with someone, and I wanted my children to grow up with a family that was together. And of course I had a lot of guilt as well, because I was the one who had left, but I simply couldn't function. I was broken down physically and mentally, and I didn't know any other way that I could continue to look after my children and live.
So for my work, I visit people in their homes, and I talk to them. I go through a long history of all of their health issues. We cover social issues, different health issues. We go through physical exam. And in my experience, the loss of a close loved one seems to be the greatest loss that people express to me. And I think it stems from the spiritual needs that we have, the need for love, the need for joy, the need for value. We often try to get these needs met by people around us, by loved ones.
Not all losses will bring us into disease. It is only those things that you lose that you consider as being of your own. And the more valuable that which I considered of my own, the greater the disease if I lose it.
On spiritual level, we cannot have tolerance like we have in the physical. That means we can take a half breath and we still are okay. We can go into minus of oxygen to a certain level in the blood. We're still alive. Where you can use less water and still be good, or use less sleep and still be good. So yes, you come to an edge in the tolerance, yes, and then the system breaks down.
If you eat too little, then you are undernutrition. If you eat too much, then you are overweighted. In the spiritual needs, we talk about to be or not to be, all or nothing.
Love must be 100%. Security must be 100%. That's why we feel insecure if we're not sure 100% things are secure. There cannot be half security. It's not possible.
Your husband cannot be loyal to you 364 days a year, and then only on day 365 he's not loyal. That will be considered betrayal, right? So there is no loyalty.
It likes with truth. There is either truth or a lie. A little lie that you might perceive from another one will bring you into a deep distress because you cannot handle lies.
Every one of our spiritual needs, whether it's harmony, security, truth, belonging, whatever it might be, we need completely. We don't have a partial need for those things, we have a complete need for those things. And you can have too little, but you can never have too much of those.
So what I realized was that a person can never supply me the love that I need because they also need love, and that there must be a source of love outside of us.
And it cannot be another human, because every human being needs those things and needs them that way. And so what is that source that I need? Well, that source is God. And what is God? God is exactly what I need. He is exactly the love that I need. He is exactly the compassion that I need. He is exactly the respect that I need. He is exactly the understanding that I need. He is exactly the harmony and the security and the truth and the belonging and so on. And everything that I need, He is. And He offers it to me at all times without any deficit. And He's personal. He's personally interested in me and in my life and what's going on. And He is unselfish, and He offers it to me for my sake, not for His.
I had grown up as a Christian, but now I really questioned if there was a God. If there was a God, I was very angry with Him because it seemed that He had nothing to offer me. The God that I had imagined, who caused all my problems, so I thought, was actually the source of love and waiting for me to take the love that He had to give me. And it was as simple as I needed to go to Him for the fulfillment that I was seeking in someone else.
I have had patients that I visited with who don't want to hear anything about God. They don't want anything spiritual to be discussed. And in that case, it's a different approach.
When people come and say, well, I don't believe in God, and how can I satisfy my need from God? My argument is very simple. We need to know there are things we can choose, but there are also things we cannot choose. We cannot choose to live. That's not our choice. We cannot choose by what we live, our needs. We cannot choose how to satisfy those needs. We cannot choose from where to satisfy our needs. What you need in your spirit, you don't find nowhere. If you can find me a place where you find love or justice on earth, let me know. I go to that place to take it as well.
I had no idea how to make God my love source. I was completely baffled by that. But I just prayed for it. And I prayed constantly for God to show me how He could be my love source. Because I was so ill, my brain was kind of foggy a lot of the time. I was weak. I read things that were easy for me to take in. And so I read the Bible promises, particularly the ones about health, how God is the one who heals us. And I don't think I had ever truly applied them to myself, but now I know God, as I continue to just pray all the time, helped me to really believe that these were for me. To have divine love for, well, it was my ex-husband at this stage. We weren't together and there was no communication between us, but I understood that in my heart that I had to have loving thoughts, that I could take the love that God gave me and I could think lovingly towards Him and not have resentment or have expectations. It was a love that would give but would not expect anything in return. And as I prayed for God to give me divine love for Him, God gave me so many insights to show me why he did the things He did, and I started to have compassion for Him rather than expectations of Him, and to see His incapacity to love me, because without taking love from God, how can anybody give love that is real? How can anyone solve their problems if they don't know how to do that?
It is very simple to have loving thoughts and loving attitudes to those who are nice to you, who say nice words, who make you feel important, and so on. But when it comes to the people who are not so nice, who do evil things to you, we find that there is something, and we see that there is something in the human nature that goes against the people that are not nice to us. And this is what we call the error in the mind, that makes us think that other people must do something to fulfill my need. And when we encounter that not all people are willing to do that, then we come into conflicts, and after the conflicts come the diseases.
I have to say, in 2 months, I was almost completely better. I saw the specialist and he pulled up the blood results on his computer, and the inflammatory markers, which are a marker of the disease, go from sky high, sharply down like this, to 1 point above normal. Now the doctor said, "What was the name of that doctor? Is he a medical doctor?" He was suddenly very interested. And I said, "Well, my knee's still a little bit stiff." He said, "Don't worry about that." He said, "You can bend way better than I can." And so from there, I continued to get better as I understood more. And that was 12 years ago. The doctors followed me up for 6 years. I think they probably thought it was just a temporary remission and that I would again become sick. And so I continued having appointments with the doctor, not so frequently. But they were doing nothing for me. I was on no medication. They just would see me and see that I was well. And then one day I was at work, I forgot my appointment. I rang and I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I've forgotten my appointment." And they said, "Don't worry, we're not doing anything for you. We'll discharge you from our books." And now I'm completely completely well. So with psoriatic arthritis, you do get joint deformation quite quickly. It's more aggressive than rheumatoid arthritis. So I have a few joints that are a little bit deformed, but there's no inflammation, there's no disease process anymore. And I can walk and run and squat and stretch and do everything I need.
Only the human heart goes against the way in which nature functions. In the human heart, we want every good thing for myself. We don't want it for the happiness of others, but for my own happiness.
We enter into relationship with the humans in order to accumulate love, not seeing that that's impossible.
When I have respected you with my respect, I expect you to respect me back. And when I have loved you with my love, I expect you to love me back, which also shows the spiritual dependency.
We only can be dependent from God automatically, or depending of humans and animals automatically.
So there are two ways that you can look at how things function and in general. And one of those is that you can give something in order to receive something, or you can take something or receive something in order to give something. We must ask ourselves the question, which comes first and which comes later? Is it the taking or receiving that comes first, or is it the giving that comes first?
Everything that functions in nature functions according to certain laws. Yes? The same happens with our bodies. The law of thermodynamics is expressed in everything. Four basic things of the law of thermodynamics is that everything that functions requires energy. The energy must come from outside. It can never come from inside, but always from the outside. The element that is functioning can store the energy for a certain time, but then it must give it out. It must be liberated.
For example, in a vehicle, you must take the fuel first before you can use the fuel. You must take the electricity from the battery before you can use the electricity from the battery. You have a tree that's growing. Well, it must take first from the ground and from the soil and the nutrients and the water, and it must take first from the sunshine before it can grow and produce anything and give its fruit and, give off oxygen and so on. So the giving comes naturally. If you eat, you are naturally going to give the byproducts of what you ate. If you drink, you're naturally going to give the byproducts of what you drank.
According to the law of cause and effect that we can see in nature and governs every element that is there in nature, we see that the purpose of every element is to give.
When we see that principle functioning in nature, then we can see that we are a part of nature as well, and so we see that principle functions in us and humans as well, and that principle will carry over not just from a biological system standpoint, but it carries over into relationships and other ways that we function, in that yes, the taking must be first. We must receive something first before we can give something, because we function like the hose, like a channel.
If the end of the garden hose is pouring out muddy water, is it something that the hose can change, or do you have to change the source? Do you have to change what is being taken in? And so things that we struggle with, things like bad thoughts, addictions, muddy water coming out of us, anger and selfishness, and these things come out of us, we can try through willpower to prevent it, to hide that behavior or hold it inside, but it's still there, unless it leads me to connect to a source that provides the love and the joy and the peace and the character of God that can be revealed through me. So thoughts are dependent on, just like anything else, thoughts are dependent on where you're taking from.
Before I became well, difficult circumstances would be extremely stressful. They could really upset my whole life. And of course, circumstances can still be stressful. But the difference is that I know there's a solution, and I know that there is something for me to learn, that they're actually for my benefit, that the stress I feel shows me that actually I'm not trusting the one who's always watching over me and won't let anything come into my life that isn't good for me. And so there's a big difference in the way I see it. It may be stressful in the moment. It may be stressful for some weeks. It may be even stressful for some months. But it's never to the point that I would despair, that I don't want to live anymore, because I know there's a solution and I know there's a purpose, and I trust my God. And when I find myself not trusting Him, I know that there's something wrong in my thinking that I need to uncover and take to Him and help Him to give me the right thoughts. Yeah, He gives me His way of thinking, which is a way of thinking with His love that never condemns another person for what they do, and it doesn't condemn me either, because God never condemned me. I did so much wrong in my life, but He just said, come to me, have my love. Jesus has taken all of your past on the cross. And so I can be generous to others the way He's been being generous to me.
If we would have that connection and perceive from God and take from God the information, His words, that is love, we would be like that. That is, I would treat my neighbor like God treats me. That is, if I take love, I will share love. If I take justice, I will do justice.
So just because God healed me from the thinking that caused that terrible disease, I didn't suddenly become perfect and knowing all truth. It was the tip of the iceberg. Underneath, there was a lot more. It's like peeling an onion. There are layers of hurt, there are layers of wrong thinking, deceived thinking that we all have, because we're just not perfect. I didn't understand that it's only when I fail, when I get myself into trouble, or when circumstances arise that show me that I've still got a lot of thinking that's not very nice. I didn't understand that had to come out, because that's the only way now that I can take it to God. I got to another point of desperation and I said, God, you have to show me how you healed me. You have to show me how I had that joy, because I can't go on like this. And it just came into sharp focus in my mind that it was at the cross that God had healed me. And that was 12 years ago that He healed me. But I can't just go to the cross 12 years ago and now be good every day. The Bible says, or Paul in the Bible says, I die daily. Daily I have to take what I see that comes out of me to the cross and exchange my life for Jesus' life. When I have a problem or when I get sick, I know that I can ask God to show me what's making me sick, what's wrong in my thinking. Because we're all born with this faulty way of evaluating things where we just see things wrongly.
As long as I can continue to receive what I believe is sufficient, then I will continue to actively participate in this relationship. But when I don't receive enough, or I don't receive anything, or they try to remove my treasure from me, now I'm not interested in the relationship anymore. I want to see how I can get out because I'm not receiving what I need to receive in order to be fulfilled.
My relationships changed after this because my expectations of people were different. And with my children, that was the biggest change, I think, because, a mother always wants her child to be good for their own sake. We want them to achieve well for their own sake, or so we think, that it's for their sake. But now I'm able to not put pressure on them to do what I think they should do. Allow them the freedom to make the mistakes that they need to make to be able to see that they need to find the same solution that I did, that they don't have love in themselves, that another person can't give it to them. And it gives a much freer relationship. So, conversations that might have been difficult or, they don't want to talk to me about it because they know Mum's just going to try and force them to do what she wants. And I can listen to their point of view and they can listen to mine. That's the big difference, is that we're willing to listen to each other and engage in a conversation because there's freedom there and it's so much nicer. I used to think that it was a terrible thing that happened to me, that it was the worst thing in my life, what I went through. And I used to be angry at God for it. But now I am so grateful for it. I don't know how I could have learned what I know now any other way. I don't think there is another way I could have learned it. It taught me so much, and it has given me a resilience that I could never have any other way, I think. And so the despair that I felt to the point of not wanting to live anymore was what I needed to be desperate enough to seek for a solution and to find a solution that could satisfy.
Well, at the beginning, when I saw physical reactions just on the stories that the patient showed me of how they processed the events that took place in their life, especially the negative events, because they have a negative influence, finding that they cause infections, they cause nose bleeding, they cause cancer, all those things, seeing them in the body, having no other means that could produce those effects except the thought. Then I had to find out, why is that what human thinks impacting his body? Now, I should have learned that and even know it before, that the body has no life of itself, that it works by power of what I think. But it's amazing that the most obvious thing we lose sight of.
There are studies that say that around 90% approximately of individuals' visits to their primary care physician have some kind of psychosomatic component to it, which means that there's something going on in the mind and it's affecting what's going on in the body. Whether that's headaches that they have, whether it's fatigue that they're suffering with, whether it's, whatever situation.
I learned about psychosomatic, how it is called, but psychosomatic is a field that is not really structured, so that you can say, okay, this is why the body gets sick from a way of or an event, because you need to explain the process.
And if you don't have time with the patients, then you just deal with the symptoms, which is a superficial level, and you don't have the opportunity of getting down into the deeper levels to find out really what's behind that. What are your relationships like? What kind of fights have you had with somebody? What is going on financially in your life? What are your major stressors? What losses have you sustained, and so on. You just don't have time to address those issues, but those are the very real issues that underlie much of what you see in medicine.
How can it be that an event that is purely mental, purely non-graspable, yes, non-physically, that can impact your body, your functions, your ear, your nose, your tongue, everything? What is the mechanism? Because if I don't have the mechanism, I just have an observation, and observation remains subjective. How can it be that something you hear on news and you jump out of the window or you do something evil to yourself?
There is an event, a certain event in the life of a patient, somehow bring the patient into a thought of loss, finally will lead to a disease, no matter what type of disease, physical disease or mental disease.
So as a physician, I clearly can see the connection between relationship issues, beliefs, and things that we would consider more spiritual, and its impact upon the health of the patients that I take care of. I didn't see that earlier on in my career because earlier on in my career, I didn't have time to ask the questions. I didn't have time to get into the life of the patients. One of the questions that you don't want to ask a patient is, how are you really doing? You ask them first, you say, how are you? And they say, oh, I'm good. And then you ask them a second time, how are you really? Then they know it's not a question, it's not just a greeting. You're actually interested in what's going on in their life. And when you do that, then you get to understand things about them and their lives that you wouldn't have understood before, and that was my experience. Asking that kind of question in a clinical setting, in a hospital setting, it'll kill your practice.
And it's amazing to see my patients during these years that they are not conscious at all, that everything what happens in their body is the result of their unconscious thinking. Evidently, these thoughts can govern the body correctly or can destroy the body.
The love that God gives, He gives to everyone. That is the nature of God, is to give. He's the source of love, and His character is to love. He doesn't discriminate and only love those we might consider worthy, but He loves all people. And so it was free for me to take. When I realized that I lose nothing, I can never lose anything. I can never lose an investment in a relationship because all I give has come from somewhere else. I saw that I was a created being and not a source of anything, not a source of wisdom or strength or power or love, that it all came from God, that He freely gave me. He sustains me every minute, and I get to use it and pass it on to benefit others. And it became much easier to do that because now I could see it was never mine. It was never mine. It was just something I took for free, something I passed on for free, and there was an endless supply. So how could you object to that? It's really quite beautiful when you understand who God is and how much He is just wanting to supply our every need.
We have not created ourselves. There is someone that created us, and that means that everything that we have does not belong to me, but it belongs to the Creator. If we can understand this, every loss that we consider as personal is no longer personal, and it can only be a loss of the Creator that brought me to life.
Once I would have thought that there was so much I would change. In fact, sometimes you wake at night and you think if only you could go back and change this or change that. But I don't think like that anymore. I know that everything was necessary, that it was God's providence to allow this so that He could save me, so that He could show me that my heart needed to change, not my circumstances, but there was a problem in me. And He wanted to help me to get rid of that problem. And so there is nothing that I would change. I know that everything has been for my good, to bring me to a point of great happiness and contentment. And I really desire to teach other people what I have learned. That is my greatest goal, no matter who it is, because I know that it saved me from despair and destruction. I don't know where I would be if I had never learned how my thinking can be changed.